So at the 50,000-foot level, everybody's saying, man, Dan Lanning in Oregon, Lincoln and USC, all these folks got to change conferences. And it fills up like magazine space. What does it actually mean? Like, you're not in the Pac-12 anymore. You're in the Big Ten. So from the time the season closed on last year to now, what that we don't think about, what that we don't see, have you had to do?
Yeah, there's not a lot outside of you're still trying to build the best roster you possibly can. I'm a believer in winning football wins, right? It doesn't, regardless of conference. What you do have to do is spend some time starting to recognize your opponents. And we do summer scouting reports on all the teams that we're going to play next year, get an idea of what the personnel changes are, what are some groupings that we might be in more often than not, and how that changes our team. But what we have to do from a retention and acquisition of talent, that doesn't really change when you're trying to build a great team.
Oregon's one of those teams that gets talked about year-round because you guys are always at or near the top of the recruiting conversation. So I've always felt growing up in like the rural South, I knew about Oregon because there's a uniqueness about Oregon. There's a uniqueness with the tie to Nike, that the way the brand is spread. So I knew about it for a long time. So in a way, Oregon's always been visible nationally. When you join the Big Ten and you're going to play multiple games in time zones that you hardly ever visit as a team, is there like a tangible effect that has on recruiting where all of a sudden people's antennas go up a little bit more? You got 20% better chance of landing this kid than you would have in a previous life?
Yeah, well, it certainly opens up some new recruiting areas for us, some opportunities to go to places we haven't necessarily gone. We've always been a national team, but we're a lot stronger now in the Midwest because of our affiliation with the conference. I think it gives people a clear vision. There's no question things were a little shaky in our last conference and where that went. Oregon was always the premier team, was going to survive whatever that looked like, but now being affiliated with some of the great traditions in the Big Ten and what that looks like, gives us a great opportunity to go into homes and get great players.
What was life like? It's out of your control. Like, you don't control which conference you guys go into. And I'm sure you may have known a little bit more than those of us on the outside, but you probably were like staring into the fog as well. So when the future is uncertain, knowing you like I think I do, like it's out of sight, out of mind because you don't control it. But at the same time, when you get questions in recruiting, when your staff is asking you questions, when you're reading headlines and everything looks like it's about to fall off a cliff for a conference, I mean, does that affect you at all, or you just got to keep on keeping on?
Well, I think you have to lean in on what you do know, and you said it. Oregon's always been a premier brand. It's always been a place where people see opportunity. It's always been a school that's innovative and ahead of the curve. So you lean in on all that, and then once you get to tie yourself to a conference like the Big Ten and what's been accomplished in this conference with some of the great teams that we get to play, it just sweetens the pot.
All right, so you're entering year 3 now, which means people think they have a lifetime of knowledge about you. You get talked about in year 3 and year 4 as a head coach like guys used to get talked about in year 14 or 15 as a head coach. So everyone else thinks they have you figured out. Do you have you figured out, or is there still a part of Dan Lanning, the head coach, Dan Lanning, the dude, that's just evolving, and you look back 2 years ago and say, wow, I've already changed a pretty good amount in this area or that area?
I hope I keep changing, right? I mean, if you're not changing as a coach, adapting, then you're falling behind. And that's something you learn from Coach Saban, Coach Smart, guys that I've been around, is you have to continue to grow with the game. You have to continue to grow personally if you want your players to grow personally. So that's something that I'm excited about growth. That's something I'm always looking forward to. And I hope the version of me today is different than the version of me 10 years from now, for sure.
Where were you, and what was your first reaction when you saw Coach Saban retired?
I was at my house, hanging out. I got a couple of text messages and phone calls kind of right before.
You thought they were fake?
Yeah. How much that guy did for this game, what he was able to create, and then the opportunity to learn from him. I'm just grateful for the experience to be around him and get to be a fly on the wall there for a little bit.
You, not many guys worked under him, and then you had a run under Kirby Smart at Georgia. So there's like a classroom, basically, you sit in as a coach that not many get exposed to. They see it from the outside. They go to conventions. They text with their buddies who have been on those staffs. But walk people through, from just a viewer-at-home perspective, how intense and how high the standard is in those buildings.
Yeah, it's you can't measure it, right? You can't measure it. It's 4th and 1 every single day. I always said when I went from Sam Houston State to Alabama, like, I'm going here to get my doctorate in football. And that's kind of what I felt like. I got an education as a coach, and then even getting the opportunity to go and coach with Mike Norvell at Memphis, and then go coach with Kirby as well. I think all those places really grew me. It's not necessarily about quantity of experience, but quality. And I was really fortunate in a short window to get some great quality of experience.
When you've been around folks who do things at a high level, and then you get your shot to put your hands on your own wheel, if you've experienced that, I got to imagine it gives you a leg up on maybe other guys that are sort of feeling their way out. It's not that you have all the answers, but you can immediately recall back to when this was operating at this level, it was never acceptable.
Right.
Folks were about to hear it Monday morning in the building.
Right.
And so then it's up to you to execute that. And you find out really quick whether, you're a general or you're just a soldier. When you go from soldier to being a general, especially for the first time, at any level, much less a level like Oregon, what's that transition period like to where now everybody's focused on you instead of you being one of many who are focused on someone else?
Yeah, I think the big piece, great leaders can't be afraid of confrontation, right? You got to be willing to address things as you see them, and you got to be able to say, hey, let's fix it. What I always like to do is be a part of that, right? I'm not just the guy that points out problems. I want to be the guy that's in there helping fix it. I want to get my hands in the dirt and help. And the other benefit of places I've been, when you don't have a strong opinion about how you want to do something, you can kind of lean back and say, well, this is how Coach Smart did it. This is how Coach Saban did it, Coach Norvell did it, Coach Graham, and lean on those experiences. So it's been fun for me to really get to put your own stamp on your program, make it yours, but at the same time be able to lean back on some experiences that you've had.
So when you guys got to the end of last season, you're in the Pac-12 championship game, you come up short, you go to a bowl game and dominate an opponent. Then you got to a period where you can just wholesale self-scout, you can top to bottom forensically analyze your program. What did you see? What were a few of the things you landed on that you thought, I got to adjust this, we got to evolve here, we got to change here?
Yeah, some critical moments. I think we started off slow in that last game in the Pac-12 championship. Certainly hurt us. Ability to stop the run in that game. We've been able to stop the run most of the season. In that game, struggled to do that, but didn't convert in some critical moments, and those are moments that we'll certainly take advantage of. Improving in the kicking game, I think, in special teams play is something that we really want to focus on this year and make an impact on. I think we have great specialists on our team now. Excited to see how they perform. It's a little different, when the lights are bright and the moments are so tight. But those are all things that we really want to attack this season. Being able to run the ball at will when necessary are things that we're really looking at.
Are there aspects that you literally have to be a coach or be behind the scenes to understand the magnitude of and understand the importance that maybe general public doesn't place on it? But you see it and you say, no, we got to hammer this thing every day. And maybe it's something on the field, or maybe it's like a mental neck up sort of thing with the team that you guys hammer on, that the outside world would say, man, they spend a lot of time on that. Why are they spending so much time on that?
Yeah, I think just the physicality of the game. I still believe football is meant to be played a certain way. And I think people would be surprised if they came to our practice how physical those practices are, how intense they are. We always want to make practice harder than the game. And, having a 50,000-foot view, you might not see the work that's put in, on a Tuesday practice, the contact that occurs at a practice. So that's something that's really important to us.
So that bleeds into the follow-up, which is having the depth required to practice like
right.
that. And then also, you've got the fact that you may have to play 17 games to get where you ultimately want to get.
Right.
So then the question becomes, okay, well, how do you balance a practice schedule, the level of physicality you're going to have in practice, and then also you get into fourth quarters, you're up 24, and there are 9 minutes left on the clock. Do you handle that any differently now, knowing the workload you're putting on guys and knowing how far you got to go versus the way you would have 5 years ago?
Yeah, you have to have your thumb on your team and have a really good understanding where your team's at. That's one thing I spent some time visiting with some NFL coaches this season about, okay, longer season, what's that look like for you at the end of the season as opposed to the beginning? Putting a priority on what's important, right? What's an important piece of practice that has to be contact and what isn't? And then just understanding your team. 10 years ago, if a team was down, 14 points with 2 minutes to go, the game was over.
Yep.
That's not the case anymore in college football. It is a little bit more the case in this conference, right? Some great defenses played in this conference. So that's something we'll continue to figure out, and it goes back to why I think the most important trait for a head coach right now is adaptability. Right? Understand your team, creating an experience to develop your roster. The depth of your roster is really important, so all those things add up.
All right, so when I see you guys land someone in recruiting, I'm going to put out the WWE gif, and that's the end of it for me, okay? Oregon got a big-time recruit. That's it. I noticed it. I'm done. Other people want to explain it, though. It can't just be this. It's got to be that as well. And so half the time, in fact, 3/4 of the time I look, and the allegations are legal, so it doesn't really matter. But there's also this hidden connotation that, well, if not for this, they wouldn't be doing that.
Right.
Can you explain the process, A to Z, in a condensed time period,
Yeah.
of what goes into recruiting, even with NIL resources in your back pocket
Right.
and what it actually takes to land a guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Recruiting, it's not one thing. It's 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. It's the evaluation, right? It's the 321 different schools that we hit this offseason, in spring recruiting. It's the 23 satellite camps. It's the phone conversations, the text message threads. It's the relationship building. And all that's built to have an opportunity to sit at the table, right? To have a seat at the table at the end, to be in that discussion. And then is NIL a part of it? Absolutely. Find a top 10 team that's not a part of their program right now. You better be willing to do it and figuring out ways to do it. And it's a part of our process, but not the only part of our process. So a lot of pieces go together. For a long time, Oregon's been signing elite players, whether it's DeAnthony Thomas or Kayvon. And for a long time, Oregon's been innovative. At one point it was, well, their jerseys are cool, and that's why kids are going. Well, they have great facilities, and what Oregon's done is they've adapted to the times and found out the best way to do things in correlation with an unbelievable staff that works their tail off every day, right? That's on the phones, recruiting, spending time developing relationships, and then a great product that your players brag on. Your best recruiting advocates for you are the players on your team. And when our players can speak about their experience at Oregon, and then the proof's in the pudding, you can look at a guy like Bo Nix that ends up being a first-round pick right here and was developed. You can point to that success, and then have all the other pieces of the puzzle that matter.
See, here's what's funny about what you just said. So I could have a $1 trillion NIL bag at Pate State. I could do that, and I could just go be the highest bidder for every kid. I could do that.
I get them all, probably.
I could also 2 years later have the class fall apart.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't really have any adhesive. Guys came there for a very, very fundamental reason.
Right.
And then there's really nothing keeping them there. So we've seen high-profile classes do that in the past 3 years, is my point. So that's my comeback on a lot of that is, okay, well, go find those guys 2 years later. Can they be your best recruiters? Because if they are actively recruiting others to the program, it means there was a lot more drawing them there than just something that honestly is not really going to be visible for them if they take care of themselves 10 years down the road. Because 10 years down the road, they're going to be making generational money.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, rooted in substance, right? Like, there has to be substance behind it. I'm really proud of the fact that we haven't lost a starter in my time since being the coach here to the portal. I think that speaks to the culture we have within our team. I think it also speaks to our ability to take care of our players. And one thing about Oregon is if we say something, we do it too, right? And there's a lot of false promises out there in college football. But when you look at the truth of our program and the people within our program, you see guys that have come here, gotten better, had success, had opportunities to go play in the NFL and win a lot of games here, which matters.
Which coaches in the Big Ten do you have the closest relationship with?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was really fun sitting in those Big Ten meetings because you see a bunch of guys that are really competitive, but really good guys that care about football, right? And, PJ Fleck's a guy that I knew before, but getting to bump into him and having an impression that I thought, and then the reality of who he is, the guy he is really unbelievable. What Brett brings to the conference with his experience in the NFL and the different places he's been is really an advocate for our group at Illinois. Jed's a guy that I've obviously had familiarity with his time at Arizona and got to connect with. But there's a lot of guys in this conference that I have a lot of respect for. And just being able to sit in the same room as them, getting to sit in the same room as Kirk Ferentz is pretty awesome. I'm still one of those guys that pinch myself and say, hey, what am I doing in here? So it's fun. Now, what's hard in college football, we don't really get to be friends anymore. We're all competing with each other. But there's a level of respect. Matt Rule's a guy that I'd sat away from for a long time and seen from a distance. Getting to know that guy cares about his team. He cares about his players. He cares about the game of football. So that's been fun for me to experience.
Now, there are a lot of folks in my industry that I grew up reading, I grew up watching, or I grew up listening to that now I'm in the same lane as.
Right.
But in our world, in the digital on-demand world, I don't have to compete against them. They can just watch anything they want to at any time. In your world, if they beat you, that's an L for you, that's a W for them. Right. And there's the added effect of, like, you just mentioned it. You kind of grew up looking up to some of these guys. You've probably taken from a lot of them.
Right.
How surreal is it? You can't focus on this on game day, but like on a non-game day, if you just look in the mirror and have a pinch myself moment for 30 seconds, how surreal is it, especially knowing your story and the atypical route you took to get where you are? How crazy is it to think, wait a second, like when we take the field on Saturday, I got the same job here as that guy has there. Like, we're equals now.
Yeah, unbelievably blessed and certainly fortunate to do it, but it's no different than when I go play, knockout with my son. I want to win, right? And winning's important. So I'm grateful for being there, but you don't want to get so caught up in the moment that you don't recognize what's the mission at hand.
So when I look at you guys, I don't think most of the country would be able to just rattle off Oregon's too deep on the D-line.
Right.
But yet in totality, that group looks ready to compete in this conference.
Right.
And we were talking about how you have to have adequate depth to practice the way you want to at a level of physicality. Also in November to be able to stand up, and then December, and then January. How good do you feel about the versatility and depth you guys have on the front?
I'll feel a lot better once we go play some games, right? But I do feel like for the first time we have a complete depth chart to the point to where we can practice the way you have to. We can develop both halves of our roster, and we have a group that can play, that has size, girth, athleticism, and if we do a great job coaching them, these guys can really perform on the field.
Were there any, being general here, were there any tweaks that you guys thought, because we're going to this conference, we need to change in terms of nutrition or strength and conditioning, or is the Oregon plan the Oregon plan?
Yeah, really our plan hasn't changed. It's about how fast we can get there, right? I always knew D-line play mattered, especially from the place I just came from, right? D-line is really important, and our D-line today looks a lot different than our D-line did when I first got there, right? And so the formula for winning football, that certainly matters. Now, there's no doubt in this conference that there's the level of physicality and the way the game's played, but that still translates back to winning football.
This new NCAA rule where you've got different on-field staffers being able to coach than you used to be able to have. I looked at that and I said, there may not be a ton of change I can make right now, but when I get to December, when I get to January, I could probably go to the G5 level or FCS level if I'm a major program. And I could take position coaches or maybe even coordinators and bring them here as off-field analysts who benefit really tangibly because they're getting on-field coaching experience at Oregon on their resume. How much do you think that rule change is going to benefit your coaching depth?
Yeah, for us personally, I'm excited because sometimes we lose landscape of the people in your program, developing the people in your program, and there was an avenue for a while where it's hard to develop young coaches in your program because they never get the opportunity to coach.
Right.
So could you go poach other programs' best coaches? Absolutely. For me, I'm way more excited about seeing our young coaches grow. We want to create an environment at Oregon where we can promote within. Right, a coach moves on, he gets an opportunity that we're really excited about for him. Now this gives us the opportunity to help develop the next guy on the roster, the next man up, and they have to be talented enough to do that. So you can't sacrifice talent. Will there be some of that happens where teams lose a great coach because he's at a smaller level and he sees an opportunity? Absolutely, and it might be something we'll assess. But more importantly, I'm excited for the young coaches on our staff and some of the coaches on the sideline on our staff that don't have to be on the sideline anymore. They can actually, be on the paint.
How do you balance the idea in your head that you want to maintain continuity of staff? Yeah. Everyone would love things not to change if you have it in a sweet spot, but yet you still want to promote an environment and foster an environment where your guys are working towards their goals and you want to help them achieve their goals. A lot of them want to be coordinators or head coaches.
Right.
Like, what's the balance? And, man, I hate to lose this guy, but, man, I'm happy for this guy.
Well, I got to remember how I got here.
You're right.
Right? And I got to remember my path and my goals and my aspirations. So I've always put my goals in my mirror. My number one goal in my mirror right now is help my people live out their dreams and aspirations. Now, in our staff and in our organization, it's about accountability, right? For you to achieve those goals, here's what I had to do to get there.
Right.
And here's what you have to be able to do to get there. And the benefit of that is when the team's first, the rest takes care of itself. The opportunities are going to come your way whenever you do a great job.
What's it like having a conversation with a guy? If they do come to you, I assume guys will come to you to get your advice about their upward mobility, and you'd have a meeting with them about that at some point during the year anyway. When a guy thinks he's ready, could be a player. When a player thinks he's ready to start, when a coach thinks he's ready to elevate, and you think almost, but not quite, how gentle or how stern does the messaging have to be in just delivering truth back to the other side of the table?
That's the part. Deliver the truth, right? Give them the truth, and people are going to make decisions best for them, what they think is best for themselves in that moment and opportunity. I'm not going to trick anybody to staying into our program. And what happens when there is change, when there is some transition, that's also an opportunity of growth in your program. But you don't want to lose, A pluses, especially if they're not ready. So you fight to keep them. But on the same note, you give them truth. And if they are ready, you remember that somebody gave you that opportunity too, and you got to give them that opportunity to move on.
We were having a conversation with another coach the other day, and there was an era, frankly, when I was coming out of high school, there was the era of specialized sports, focus on playing one sport, and some of us got tricked into that. Fortunately, that's waned a little bit, and you got some pretty high-level guys that still play multiple sports, some of them even into the college level. How often do you deal with that in recruiting? Guy, baseball, basketball, and football. And, Coach, I may want to continue that. How beneficial is that from a skill standpoint? And How do you handle those conversations?
Yeah, at Oregon, that's really who we are. If you look at our team, you'll see a Golden Glove winner there playing linebacker in Bryce Betcher, and I think he was fourth this year on our fourth or fifth this year on our team in tackles. So he's able to do both. You see Rod Pleasant out there playing corner and then running track in the spring. So this is a place where we really embrace that. We love recruiting guys that are multi-sport athletes. But what's great about our place, you actually could get the opportunity to do that after you come here as a player as well, and proof's in the pudding. I've been a lot of places where they say that, and you get to campus and spring ball rolls around and coach is saying, wait.
We're not still doing that.
Doing that.
Yeah.
We just told you that. No, like at our place, it's you can see it. It's actually happened. Bryce Betcher is a great example of that. Rod Pleasant is a great example of that. At one point, Oregon's 4x1 team was all football players. I think that's awesome for the sport. I think that's awesome for all sports. And it's certainly something we embrace at our place.
If you're the kind of place that delivers on promises, how often do you hear from guys, maybe coaches, but mostly players, who chose somewhere else? They go somewhere else. Maybe they got there, maybe it wasn't what they thought it'd be, and maybe it's just random Tuesday. You see a text, hey man, miss you guys. Probably would do it different if I could do it over again. Is that common, or is that more fantasy?
It certainly happens. It certainly happens, and that's where I think in recruiting it matters to not. Don't always be bad. You shouldn't always feel bad about finishing second, because sometimes that might come full circle. And we do a great job of maintaining relationships with guys, even if they don't choose our place. I want to see kids be successful. I want to see players go in and change their family's future, and I want to see guys that love football have success. So sometimes it's a great lesson for them, and it might translate to a decision they make down the road. Maybe they didn't pick here, but down the road they're going to be a better decision maker when they get that opportunity and evaluate everything that's around them, and that's the benefit.
Folks have been talking. So folks have been talking around Indy all week. Not how the duck got in the river, but who knew about the duck? Did you know about the duck ahead of time?
I'd maybe heard about the duck. I'm really fighting right now to get this inflatable duck to travel to all of our away games. I think that would maybe bother people a little bit, and I don't mind bothering people. It means maybe you're doing something.
No, the more people bother, the better. I want to know about deployment. Is that something you just pull out at 3 a.m.?
I didn't actually institute. I wasn't the one inflating that thing, but really, I would love to see that video.
But if you wink at me, I know what that means. You don't have to admit anything publicly. Okay, so
we got mighty different around here. That's certainly something that's a little bit different.
Let me tell you something. A lot of these places you're going to play, there's no water nearby.
Yeah,
so
maybe
that thing,
a cornfield.
Yeah, that thing may stay in storage, the airplane hangar. Okay, so you came here. You were nice enough to hit us first today. So we're talking in the morning before you do this.
Yeah.
They're going to ask you a million questions today, but the one or two things you have circled, bright red Sharpie, this is the thing that we have to nail for this year's team to be what it needs to be. What is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that there's a lot of that other than really creating a team again. I don't know if people realize in college football, I think everyone does, how much teams change. In my 2 years here, we have 10 players on our roster right now that were there when we got there. It's a different team. And this year we had, we brought in a lot of players as well. So it's about how quickly can you become a team. We have guys that have experience, some at other places, some here. But it's about developing your roster and getting to play as a team and be unselfish. It's really hard in college football now, but we have a team that really believes in that. So those are the pieces that are going to matter. Playing to our standard, not necessarily playing to our opponent. I think it's something that we really got to focus on this year as well.
Dan Lanning, we appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it, man.